Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today we're going to make a wood carving knife with lots of power tools. So I'm guessing that a lot of you guys have probably already watched the companion to this piece, which is a video about how to make a wood carving knife using no power tools. In this one, we're going to pull from all kinds of power tools around the shop, professional tools, a lot of stuff that some of you guys may not have, and we're going to end up with a knife. This is the cool thing about this video, very similar to the knife that we made using no power tools. So, general point being, you can start with no power tools or tons of tools and really still make quality knives. All right, let's jump into it. Befitting the theme of this video, which is Mucho Mas power tools, we'll be using stainless steel for the blade of our wood carving knife. What does that have to do with power tools? Well, in the previous video we heat treated high carbon steel, which we can do effectively with relatively low tech equipment, but stainless steels require much more precise temperature controls. In this case, I'm using the classic cutlery stainless steel 440C. Much maligned, but really not a bad steel at all. For the handle of the blade, we'll be using this little piece of scrap Gabon ebony, the same kind of wood used for piano keys. It's hard, durable, and beautiful. What's not to like? I'll begin by using my bandsaw to clear out the slot. The steel I'm using is about 0.08 inches thick, so I just keep moving the fence, pecking away until the steel just barely slides into the slot. Here I'm roughing out the basic shape of the handle on my 2x72 inch belt grinder. Next, I'll go to the drill press and drill holes for 2 pins which will retain the blade in the handle. I make sure the blade blank is firmly seated before drilling the first hole. I don't want it to wiggle around. I'm using 1/8 inch diameter pins. You can buy this kind of stock at hobby stores and home improvement stores. In fact, you could use anything from stainless steel to nickel silver, but as you see, I'm using brass in this case. Once that first hole's drilled, I'll insert a locator pin and then drill the second hole. If you don't take the step of using a locator pin, good chance the blade will slide around and you'll end up with holes that are out of register. Or as they say around here, it'll be ruined. Now I'll draw the basic shape of the blade. It's a Wharncliffe, meaning that it has a flat cutting edge and a curved top. Good for consistent cuts in wood from one end of the blade to the other. I'll give the blade its shape on the belt grinder using a 40 grit ceramic belt. I want it to flow organically from the handle, so I'm grinding them together. Once I've got an overall profile that I'm happy with, I'll start grinding the bevels into the blade. You'll notice that I threw a little tape around the handle. Vibration from the grinding can jiggle the pins out, so this saves me from fishing around in a bucket of rusty water looking for them. How would I know this? Friends who are less perfect human beings than I am have told me, but, it's never happened to me or anything. Grinding skinny little pieces of steel like this is pretty tricky, so I'm just taking it nice and slow. Get too aggressive and you'll end up blowing right through it. Once the bevels are where I want them, I'll work my way up the grits, 60, 120, 220, 400. If you're considering getting a belt grinder and don't know what belts to get, I'd buy a bunch of belts in that sequence I just gave you, 40, 60, 120, 220, and then 320 or 400. Just experiment with them and see what sequence works for you. It's not uncommon for me to skip from, say, 40 to 120 or that sort of thing. It really just depends on the job, the steel, how worn the belts are, and so on. Now I've got the bevels formed. Time for heat treating. Virtually all steels that are capable of being hardened will have heat treating recipes available from manufacturers of the steel. These are found in the form of technical data sheets. In some cases, they may take a little decoding. A technical data sheet may refer to the austenitizing temperature. That's how hot the steel needs to be heated before being quenched. They'll also sometimes refer to soak times. The soak time is how long you leave it in the heat treating oven at a particular temperature. In this case, I'll be heating the steel to 1900 degrees Fahrenheit and soaking it for 30 minutes. There are sound and complex metallurgical reasons why you should follow manufacturers' heat treating instructions relatively carefully. The old heat it to cherry red and dunk it in a bucket of horse piss approach won't hack it with stainless steels. Because of the high heats and long soak times required for stainless steels, these steels have to be kept away from oxygen, which will leach out the carbon, create lots of nasty scale, and weaken the steel. In industry, they're typically heated in vacuum furnaces or in non-reactive gases or sometimes even molten salt. But we'll wrap them in stainless steel heat treating foil to shield them from the air. It's a little bit like folding up a razor blade. This stuff's really sharp, so you have to be careful in order to avoid cutting yourself. After soaking, the blade and the little packet it's in is taken out and pressed between two aluminum plates. You can also quench in still air and it'll work just fine. The plate quench approach lessens the likelihood of warping, however. The steel is then given 2 tempering cycles of 2 hours each at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And here's the blade after heat treat. Next, I'll clean off the oxides and bring the bevel to its final size. I used to leave a fair amount of meat and take it off here, but now I basically just clean off the oxides and make sure everything's nice and even. Now we're ready to assemble the whole schmear. A little bit of 2-part epoxy will keep everything together. In the companion video, I peened the ends of the pins, giving a mechanical lock. Here I'm just relying on the epoxy, which will last longer, probably the peened pins. But guess what? This won't go anywhere for a long, long time. Now I'll go ahead and grind the handle to its final shape. I'm looking for nice smooth curves and an organic feel that will be comfortable to use. One of the cool things about belt grinders is that you can use all kinds of different surfaces of the grinder that were not actually intended as grinding surfaces when they were originally designed. In essence, this allows you to do slat grinding on a flat platen setup. That said, if you're going to do this and use that top surface like I'm doing here, you want to be ultra careful. All it takes is for the belt grinder to sling that knife one time and you could be dead or lose an eye or whatever. I've never in 15 years of using a belt grinder had it throw a knife, but if it did, big problem. So I always stand to the side if I'm using that top part of the grinder. At this point the blade is masked off so I don't scratch it up, and I'll take the ebony to its final level of finish by hand. I'll sand the blade all the way up to 1000 grit. Now, if this were maple or cherry or something, it wouldn't be worth going up to that high a grit, but oily exotics like cocobolo, rosewood, ebony, and so on reward the elbow grease with a very beautiful shine. The final step, a simple application of furniture wax. I'll buff it out with a paper towel. Now, I could get a little bit harder shine if I hit it up with the buffer, but my buffer's kind of hidden away in the corner of my shop right now, and it's a little bit of a pain in the neck to film. So, guess what? We're sticking with this. And there we have it. So, back to back, here are the two blades. One, all handwork, the other, machinery to the max. Which one's better? I think you'd be hard pressed to say. One took about 2 or 3 times longer, but the level of skill required is basically the same for each one. There are folks who think that just because you use a machine, that means you just kind of punch a button and out pops your widget. Not hardly. Running a belt grinder really well, for instance, takes a great deal of practice and a high level of skill. What you sacrifice by using hand tools is not quality, it's just time. And if you're doing this for a hobby, spending time doing the work is what it's all about. So there's really not a reason in the world why you'd ever feel the need to bug your wife about borrowing your kid's lunch money to buy that $3,000 belt grinder. Yeah, no. Of course you're going to buy that $3,000 belt grinder, but you don't have to do it right now. Besides, what could be more character building for your kid than to do without lunch for 2 or 3 years in order to pay for daddy's belt grinder? Repeat after me. It's all about the children. So I hope you enjoyed our tale of two knives here. Power tools, no power tools. We end up with something that's pretty cool whichever route we go. So wherever you're coming from, whatever your shop's like, believe me, you can get out there and make high quality knives just like the pros. Hey guys, if you found value in this video, I hope you'll consider partnering with the channel to help us bring more videos, better videos, more knives, more techniques, all that cool stuff. Click the link to Patreon to help this channel. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, bro, what are you waiting on? And check me out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. Also, if you're into Japanese swords, check out my website, waltersorelsblades.com, where you'll see more of my work and where you'll find videos about the making of Japanese swords, along with mounting, fittings, polishing, hamones, all kinds of good stuff. Now, more videos.